A wonderful Tuesday. Welcome into lcpioneers.com live, presented by PioStream. We're with you 4 days a week, 11:30 a.m. Pacific time on Facebook Live. You can find us easily by going to lcpioneers.com/live. You can also watch on demand. All of our shows from the past available to watch on demand at youtube.com/lcpios, as we keep you connected with student athletes, coaches, alumni, and different members from the Lewis and Clark College community on our Facebook Live program. Hi there, everyone. I'm Ryan Goff. I am the play-by-play voice and director of athletic communications for Lewis and Clark. We are the Pioneers out of Portland, Oregon, and a member of the NCAA Division III ranks, competing with over 430 institutions across the country, and a member of the Northwest Conference with other institutions from throughout Northwest Oregon and the state of Washington. We have 19 intercollegiate athletics programs and an opportunity for everyone to get involved with a fantastic experiential liberal arts education just 6 miles southwest of downtown Portland. We're excited as we'll bring in Karl Dickman today. He is an alumnus of the Lewis and Clark cross country and track and field programs, still ranked 6th all time on the cross country fastest times list, and excited to catch up with him and see what a Lewis and Clark education meant for him, where it's taken him professionally, and then also how running has stayed a part of his life, how his teammates have stayed part of his life. We're excited to talk to him in a few minutes from now and get to know him. 4 live shows this week. We're really excited to have a lot of different variety of guests on the show this week, including 2 members from our alumni, Carl, and then Christine Eliasso from women's tennis coming up on Friday. We invite you to get involved with the program. You can do so by putting a comment in the Facebook Live comments below. You can also email us anytime, sports@lclark.edu. A chance for you to ask questions of any of our guests, or make a suggestion for a future guest, too, that you want to have on the show. We would love to take that feedback and try to find people who you're interested in having on the program. We do invite you to connect with us on Twitter and Instagram as well. You can do so. LC Pioneers, our handle on both, as we continue to post different pieces of content through the fall 2020 semester. And the absence of competition in the Northwest Conference, without any games through at least January 1st, 2020, trying to keep you updated on what our student athletes and students alike are going through right now, about 4 weeks now into the semester, the fall 2020 semester. Big news last week, as we've mentioned a couple times on the program, our class of 2020 for the Lewis and Clark Athletics Hall of Fame. You can see that list right now at lcpioneers.com, and excited to welcome in 4 individuals, plus 2 others for lifetime achievement and meritorious service, plus the 1993-94 men's basketball team. We'll welcome them into the Lewis and Clark Athletics Hall of Fame at some point down the road, planning an in-person ceremony sometime in spring 2021, and we'll pass that information along to you as soon as we have it finalized. And then, as I've mentioned a couple times on the show too, we want you to keep in touch with our student athletes, our featured student athlete of the week, our pioneers of the week, being listed right now as we roll one of those out, usually every Monday on our website, lcpioneers.com. You can click on the fan zone and go to Pioneers of the Week to see what our student athletes are doing, either coming into the fall 2020 semester or throughout the semester. And then, as I mentioned, our playlist updated, youtube.com/lcpios, an opportunity for you to keep tabs on all of our shows on demand on our YouTube page. There's a playlist dating back to the final day of March this year. So with that said, let's bring in our guest for the day. We're excited to talk to Karl Dickman, men's cross country and track and field alumnus on lcpioneers.com live. Karl, thanks for taking some time out of your Tuesday to talk to us and catch up. Excited to just kind of get a feel for what's been going on since you left class of 2010. Let's start, professionally. What is it that you've pursued after Lewis and Clark post-graduation? What are you doing currently?
Hi, thanks for having me on, Ryan. My senior year at Lewis and Clark, I took a class with Dr. Peter Drake in the math department called software development, and my current company was the client that we worked with on that course. So I had the opportunity to present the whole class's project as my job interview for ICF. And I started with them 6 weeks after graduating, and I recently celebrated my 10-year anniversary in the job.
That's amazing. I mean, that's a firsthand acknowledgement, right, of the value of being just 6 miles from downtown Portland, Oregon. What type of work do you do for ICF, and what are your favorite aspects of that work?
So, as a software developer there, I've had a lot of responsibilities, everything from desktop application development to website development to database management to other things like writing code for analysis. Because one of the things about ICF is that it's a consulting company with a very broad portfolio. So, my job as a developer isn't necessarily to have a specific line of products that we deliver so much as working in collaboration with a lot of different other consultants at the company who work in areas like natural resource management or electric vehicle charging, demand projections, or quite a lot of different things. I could go on and on.
Yeah, it sounds like a wide variety. And as I've asked several people on this show since the pandemic hit in the middle of March, I'm curious, how has your work been affected by the pandemic? Are you finding yourself at the house a lot more?
Yeah. In late March, the company ordered that anybody who could work from home for the foreseeable future. And that's what I've been doing since then. I've always had a national portfolio of clients. My first project that I did at ICF was mainly um, fatality monitoring at a wind farm in California, and many of my other collaborators sat in ICF Seattle office. So I pretty much from the get-go had to be able to collaborate effectively across geographies, and that meant using tools like a lot of us are getting familiar with now to communicate with people, whether that was screen sharing through what at the time was, I don't even recall the Windows client that we used for screen sharing initially, but that has meant that I have had a lot of the tools and experience in place already to collaborate remotely with the people who used to sit right next to me in the cubicles at my office and now have to work from home as well.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like in a way you had a head start for the adjustment to work from home. And you majored in computer science and mathematics. And you gave us some insight on specifically with ICF how you found an opportunity with the company. In general, what were some of the aspects about the major classes or professors that you worked with that really stood out in terms of preparing you for a career in software development?
Yeah, one thing that's worth noting is computer science and mathematics can sound like a double major, but what it actually is it's one of, at the time, two and now three majors that's offered by the math department. So there's the math major, there's the computer science and math major, and then there's the straight computer science major, which wasn't available at the time that I was there. And so the key thing is that in order to achieve that degree, I had to take a variety of math classes, not just computer science classes. And many of the classes were math focused. And I've had to do a lot of work that is math heavy as far as computer programming goes. So, yet another one of the projects in my portfolio is a salmon habitat model. And I had to get to grips with a specific mathematical model of fish life history called the Beveridge and Holt model. And just being able to work my way through the math of that was a huge help. And it's not necessarily something that's people would think of as being part of a computer science curriculum, but where I work, it's been very, very helpful.
Karl Dickman, our guest on lcpioneers.com live, a class of 2010 alumnus of men's cross country and track and field. I always like to get the origin story. There's always a reason that somebody ended up choosing Lewis and Clark to study and compete. What was that reason for you?
Well, for me, maybe a less exciting story than a lot of people. My high school guidance counselor said you apply to three schools. You apply to one that's a reach, you apply to one that's a safety school, and you apply to one that's somewhere in between. So I followed that advice to the letter. I applied to MIT, I applied to the University of Oregon, and I applied to Lewis and Clark. And I didn't get into MIT, and I toured both the University of Oregon and Lewis and Clark. And I had always thought that a smaller college rather than a larger university was going to be the right fit for me. And that's how it ended up. I immediately saw that Lewis and Clark was going to be my first choice of the two that had bided me. Just go and walk around the campus and look at the rhododendrons in bloom, for example. There's a It's a very appealing place to visit.
Yeah, it's an amazing campus, truly, and something that, right now in the middle of the pandemic, for those who aren't on campus frequently, and like we talked about, either working from home or taking classes remotely, everyone misses it. It's something that I talked to a bunch of my colleagues about, how hard it was to be away for so long. That said, I mean, you obviously got into Lewis and Clark, had a chance to pursue your degree, but also compete. What was it about running that had always appealed to you, really hooked you into that sport?
Yeah, I'd have to go back to my freshman year of high school. I truthfully can't tell you why I decided that that was something I needed to sign up for, but I did. And at my first summer practice, I was in great shape. I think I ran for the first mile and then walked and ran off and on for the rest because I just didn't have the gears to keep running all the way. But I stuck with it and just had a steady progression that started in 2003 as a high school freshman and took me all the way through to 2009, setting that number 6 time, and then 2010 running in the 5K and the 10K in track, and then graduating.
Well, and that's something I wanted to ask you. You referenced that sixth best all time mark for Lewis and Clark. It happened at the Willamette Invitational. I'm curious what it takes to have that kind of race, one that stands the test of time as, a best ever at an institution.
Well, I already referenced a little bit of it. That was the culmination of 8 years of training and 8 years of working with coaches who knew a lot about training and preparation and racing. And so, starting out when I was 13, I got faster and faster and built on it each year. And then, specifically in the senior year, bits and pieces came together. So I think it was 2 weeks before I ran that time at Willamette, I finished third place in the Sun Dodger Invitational. And I actually led that race from about 800 meters to go to about 600 meters to go when I was out kicked. And then I think it was the Tuesday before the Willamette Invitational, we did a workout called Aerobic 200s, where you run 30 laps on the track, half the lap is just like easy recovery, and the other half is pretty fast. And in the middle of that workout, I had the epiphany that I could have won the race if I had been able to go just that little bit faster to keep the two guys who passed me inside of the finish line off of my back. And so then it's that long base and those little pieces of racing strategy that come together into that big race. And, there's also a lot of confidence too of having the faith in your training to be out there running and doing my warm up and seeing the Willamette University men's team, which is, I don't know if they still are because I haven't followed it that closely, but it was always the powerhouse school in cross country at that time. And I just saw them run by and I thought to myself, I'm going to beat all of you. And I did.
He's Karl Dickman joining us on lcpioneers.com live. You can watch with us Tuesday through Friday, 11:30 a.m. Pacific time, live on Facebook Live at lcpioneers.com/live or on demand at youtube.com/lcpios. And Karl, running has stayed with you now 10 years removed from graduation, including having an impact this weekend. It's the pandemic, so things don't always look maybe as we're accustomed to. Describe what race you took part in and how this past weekend.
Yes, there's an event in Spokane, Washington called Bloomsday. It's a 12K road race, and it's a very big event. If I recall correctly, I think in 2019 there were 30,000 people who towed the line for Bloomsday 2019. And I've known a fair number of people from Spokane over the years, and all of them say, "Oh, Bloomsday, I have to go Bloomsday. It's so cool." So for some reason this year, I finally decided, heck, why not? I'll sign up for it. Have a friend who recently moved back there, and it's a good opportunity to go and visit a former teammate. So I signed up. And then it was supposed to be in May. we were still in the middle of quarantine, and so they postponed it to September, and that didn't work. So they had to make the race go all virtual. So this Saturday was when I did my virtual Bloomsday. I drove out to the Telford Road trailhead on the Springwater corridor, and I ran from there to the end of the Springwater corridor, Boring, Oregon, and back to the starting line. And I just had to go and do that race by myself instead of with 30,000 other people.
Yeah, I mean, I imagine that's just a different feeling than what you anticipated. But of course, I assume the result is what you had hoped, right?
Yeah, not quite. Uh, I've decided I want to go back. So what I want to try for is something called second seating, where I'd get to be in a pretty early starting booth, and to do that, I'd have to run 48 minutes or faster for the 12K. And what I ran was just under 53. And it's maybe not the time I was looking for, but it was definitely the best I could do on the day. It took a lot out of me to make that time.
Well, I wish you the best of luck as you pursue that next goal. And I want to close with this. You know, you mentioned you're in Portland. You've been with the same company since graduating from Lewis and Clark, and that is in step with some of the things that I've always noticed about Lewis and Clark is a lot of the alumni stay close to Portland regardless of where they've come from. I mean, we've had student athletes in recent years from as many as 35 states, right? And so
Yeah.
I'm curious, how do you stay in touch with teammates? Do you have a lot of teammates who are still around the Portland area? Do they fit that mold as well?
Yeah, I have several teammates who have stayed, many who have gone to places and come back. One of them went to law school at George Washington University, and he's back here working for the public defender's office. That's Peter Klim. Richie Lynn, who is a year behind me, now works for Nike after having been all over the place getting his PhD. And Leif Bullock, who's a couple years older than me, just moved back, and he was in China for quite a while, where he met his wife, and I have had the chance to meet his wife and their little boy Lucas before everything shut down a few months ago.
So when you look back then at your time as a Lewis and Clark student athlete, we talked about competition and things, but in terms of stories or memories specific to former teammates of yours or just being part of the cross country and track and field programs, is there a story that sticks out kind of top of mind?
I don't know about a story exactly, but I think what sticks out the most is the feeling of having a routine where you got to go and run with your friends every day. Uh, I'm very fortunate to get to spend time with those people like Peter and Leaf and Richie and others who've stayed in town. But it's just that shuffling around of schedules, right? To be able to get to run together, we don't have a set time where we get to spend uh, that running together anymore.
Well, we certainly appreciate at least staying in touch with us, being on the show today. It was funny because you shared remembering my first year with PioStream and a specific thing that we did on a coach's show. So it's neat to kind of see that tie-in back to your last couple of years there at Lewis and Clark. And wish you best of luck. Excited for the future, and certainly appreciate your time talking to us on lcpioneers.com live.
Thanks so much for having me.
Absolutely. That's Karl Dickman joining us on the show. Yeah, he referenced a bit that we did for the PioPack Coaches Show, which when we first launched PioStream in a form to what it looks like now, we would do a quiz show at the end with a few of the student athletes, either that we had on the show or that we recruited to be on this quiz show. And we'll find a link to that and maybe even put it in our YouTube page comments for this show. But it was fun. I mean, it was me 10 years ago working with student athletes, and he specifically, Karl, remembered a key question that I asked someone else. And it's just neat to see how that kind of comes full circle, which for the coaches and the student athletes and the alumni who have a chance to work with student athletes, be part of an intercollegiate athletics program. I've always heard, and now 10 years removed from when I first started with Lewis and Clark, I'm starting to experience those memories. The feeling when you have a student who comes back and you're a professor and hears how you impacted their life, or how your experience as a student athlete competing for a coach. There's lots of versions of those stories, and just having Karl mention something that in a way is pretty insignificant, right? It's just a question that was asked on a show, but he remembered the answer, remembered that moment, and it didn't even involve him specifically, which I thought was super neat. And I really enjoyed that part of the show. And maybe, once the pandemic is subsided or gone, perhaps that's something that we bring back now that we're doing a show 4 days a week on our Facebook Live page. But big thanks to Karl for bringing that up, because that certainly made me smile. And it's nice to have things that make you smile right now. That's the first guest of 4 this week on lcpioneers.com Live. We'll have Jalen Hodges join us, a sophomore from women's rowing and a coxswain. We'll have a chance to get a feel for why Jalen chose Lewis and Clark and some of the aspects that the coxswain have on a rowing team. I mean, sometimes the most simple question to ask is the one that's the most fun, because you just get a firsthand view of the importance of her position within the team and what she provides the rowers that are with her in competition. So that's one question of many we'll ask Jalen tomorrow. And then we'll have head volleyball coach Emily Hayes join us on Thursday. And as I mentioned at the top, Christine Eliasso will join us on Friday, an alumnus of women's tennis from the class of 18. Queen Christine, as she was known, while at Lewis and Clark, and a member of that 2016 Northwest Conference Championship team. So we'll catch up with her and see what she's up to. Also excited to tell you about a women's soccer watchback that we're planning to do on Saturday. We have it recorded. I'm currently editing as we speak, but we look back at the double overtime victory over Willamette last year that was in the middle of just a great run for women's soccer. And it's something we're planning to do with many of our teams in the fall. And then, of course, if competition is, subsided for much longer than January 1st, maybe that's something we look into doing with some of our winter teams too. But a chance to kind of just look back, and we had 4 student athletes, Coach Tercy on us on a call, and it was just neat to hear some of the memories. So I'm currently editing that. We'll put that out there on Saturday. It'll probably be around noon. And we'll have links to it on Facebook as well as through PioStream. You can find that lcpioneers.com/PioStream. And 2 of the student athletes who weren't on the call are planning to also be standing by to do live chatting too. So if there's questions that you have for the team, or maybe you were at the game, or maybe you're an alumnus, any of those scenarios, it'll be kind of fun to not only hear thoughts from the recording, but also to have that interaction there too. I certainly encourage you to join us, even if you can only stay for 20 minutes. It'll probably be about a 90-minute show coming up sometime this weekend. We'll have more information about that specifically in the coming days on our social media platforms, as well as on this show. So big thanks again to Karl for joining us. Big thanks to you for watching, wherever you may be. I'm Ryan Goff. Thanks for having fun. We'll hopefully talk to you again tomorrow at 11:30 for more lcpioneers.com Live with women's rowing's Jalen Hodges. Until we talk to you then, goodbye, everybody. Hope you have a great rest of your Tuesday, and we'll see you again soon. Make sure to catch the shows on demand at youtube.com/lcpios. Goodbye, everybody.
I think everyone should take intro to chemistry because the chemistry department here is phenomenal. Everyone I've known has had a good experience with everyone in that department, so I think it's a worthwhile course to take.
What is one class that everyone should take at Lewis and Clark? I really enjoyed education in a complex world. You kind of get to discuss all the issues that exist within education today, and you get to kind of explore that by going to classrooms firsthand and volunteering with children, which I thought was a really wonderful experience.
One class that everybody should take at Lewis and Clark is anything with Kundaicharan, though. I think he definitely changed how I thought about rhetoric and media studies and just education in general.
For me, it was international affairs, just intro to international affairs, because I think it really gives a good perspective on important issues around the world.